Hey, Ryan Michael Galloway here with We Don't Need No Sneaking Company.com, and I'm talking to Steve Anderson of Steve Anderson Music Services, and we've been talking stringed instruments. Mostly we've been talking about electric guitars, and we touched on, oh boy, there's my bad pun again, but I touched on acoustic guitars briefly, and let's go talk a little bit more about acoustic guitars and how they produce sound and that kind of thing. So, first of all, I'm going to lay down the basics, which is, my understanding is that you stretch string across a bunch of really resonant wood, and you got this box of varying sizes, and it vibrates and projects the sound out of whatever kinds of sound holes you might have.
Right.
If they're F holes or they're round or whatever. I know, well, there's a lot of experimentation around that and the shape of the hole and everything else. So that would be the basics. But well, there's an awful lot of people that crow about the different kinds of wood that they use, and I know some of it is either a veneer or it's something just there to produce looks. But I also know that wood is of different brittleness, and it's of different density.
Sure. You look
And
at
stuff like that. How does that affect the sound, and what are some different materials we might look at in a guitar top particularly?
Sure. Well, and most guitar builders will tell you that the majority of the guitar tone is coming from the top and the way it's braced,
Okay.
and the material that's used. You look for weight versus strength ratios. That's why most steel string acoustic guitars use Sitka spruce. It's a guitar that has a really high weight to strength ratio.
And spruce is that's not a hardwood, is it?
It's not a hardwood, no.
It's a conifer. Okay. But it's hard enough.
Yeah, it's hard enough. Well, and that's
strong.
where most of the guitar tones that we're familiar with we hear. The exceptions then being, Western red spruce, Western red cedar. Occasionally, then you'll hear there'll be different varieties of spruce, not necessarily Sitka. You'll see Adirondack spruce, which is what most of the classic Martin and Gibson guitars were made with.
Okay.
Then you might see Engelmann spruce or German spruce, which has a brighter, ringier tone than a regular Sitka top would have.
Now, are there some that are laminated tops?
There are. I mean, acoustic guitars typically come in, steel string acoustic guitars typically come in kind of 3 different grades.
Okay.
Usually beginner guitars are all plywood guitars. And
Plywood?
well, laminate.
Okay. But I get that. That is plywood.
Yeah, that's plywood. The benefit of that is they're structurally very sound. They are going to likely maintain their structure the life of the guitar. And if you like the way the guitar sounds when it's right out of the box, that's good, because that's probably how that is going to sound forever.
Forever, yeah.
That second category guitars will have solid components, typically solid top, and sometimes other components that are solid. A solid top, as it resonates and as it's played, it matures and deepens and starts to develop its own resonance in tandem with how it's played.
Okay.
And so that's why a lot of Spanish builders, folks that build nylon string guitars, flamenco guitars, and
So Ramirez used to be one of the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Most of those builders believe that because most of the tone comes from the top and the way it's braced, they don't care whether the back and sides are laminate or plywood, or that doesn't matter to them, because all they're concentrating it on is making the top nice and making it braced well, and then having a nice reflective surface on the inside to help project it out. Americans specifically, steel string guitars, most American folks want to have solid wood guitars. Those are typically the best guitars anyway. But there's a little bit of theory about whether or not anything but the top really matters.
Interesting.
But I think Bob Taylor has talked about he wouldn't have built any guitars with solid backs and sides, except he didn't think he'd sell them against a Martin. So he had to compare apples to apples.
I see. So there's some other woods out there, but and I've even seen them on the top. I've seen maybe something that looks like maple and zebra wood and all kinds of interesting, strange things. And that's going to affect the sound. Right?
It is going to, and in most cases, especially if it's maple or zebra wood, since those are the two you mentioned, those are probably laminates. They're probably not solid wood guitars.
Okay. So those will be a cheap guitar.
Well, yeah, sort of. There are some companies that, like McPherson. McPherson uses a laminated Koa top, and it sounds phenomenal.
Even for their top grade guitar.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a $7,000 to $8,000 guitar.
Wow.
Generally speaking, though, if you see a hardwood top on a guitar, like walnut or mahogany, those guitars are going to sound fantastic depending on how they're braced. I've played old Martin 017s or 0017s that are fantastic sounding. They're all mahogany. And they were their lower grade guitars. They didn't cost as much as their contemporaries.
They sound great now.
Well, and typically because of the fact that they don't move as much as Sitka spruce or cedar, they're going to be throatier and brassier, a little harsher, not going to have the nice crisp trebles, not going to have the nice smooth low end. They're going to be throaty and really punchy in the lower mids.
Interesting, interesting. So that's all density and brutality, and that's probably not even a word. It's probably more like, I don't know, what would be the tensile strength or something. But my dad was a forester when he was alive and early on. And I literally grew up the first few years on a ranger station. And I remember hearing my brother both saying the same thing. They both did a lot of woodwork and that kind of thing, or worked with wood in different ways. And they said pound for pound that wood is stronger than steel. So it's quite a material. It's a natural one. You can't always predict what it's going to do.
Yeah, it's not a perfect science. When I was at Breedlove, we talked about trying to put together some kind of a continuum that showed, okay, this is what Western red cedar sounds like, and this is what Engelmann spruce sounds like. And we know that generally cedar is darker and smoother and richer, and Engelmann spruce is chimier and brighter. But gosh, when I laid all the other woods in that continuum and said, okay, Mr. Henderson, what do you think? He was furious. He was really upset. He's like, you can't just say that. It's not always true. Sometimes German spruce sounds dark and resonant and full and rich, and sometimes Western red cedar sounds brittle and bright and thin. And
well, it could be things that we as the guitar player don't even know about, like how the wood got cured, and
right. Well,
was it aged or kilned?
Exactly, and the density and how thick it was cut and how it's braced.
The growing seasons.
Absolutely.
Because I know from watching my dad that that if it was in an area that didn't have a lot of water, it's going to be a denser wood because the rings are going to be tighter and that kind of thing. So lots to affect it. So maybe the lesson is before you buy that guitar, play it.
Well, yeah, unless you're working with a company that is remarkably consistent.
Yeah,
and there aren't that many of those out there.
Exactly.
Taylor probably being the one that Bob Taylor's done a really good job of making sure that he's built a very consistent guitar.
Gotcha. All right, fantastic. I'm Ryan Michael Galloway, and we don't need no stinkingrecordcompany.com. We've been talking to Steve Anderson of Steve Anderson Music Services, and we'll be back at least for one more post. Thanks.